Luna Oi, along with her husband, famed Nazi lover, from what I've heard. No love lost here. Luna Oi is a Vietnamese nationalist. She doesn't believe anything apart from Vietnamese nationalism. If being a Vietnamese nationalist means she has to do or say fascist things, like argue that the government cracking down on pro-queer movements in Vietnam is them actually fighting against Western imperialism, then she will. You know, she'll oscillate between any set of positions necessary because she's just about defending Vietnam. But she likes to pretend that Vietnam is like a communist government. Vietnam has a close relationship with the United States and had a massive economic boom following reform towards capitalism, privatization, free market economics. As a consequence of this, the Vietnamese people really, really, really like free market economics. So she doesn't like the fact that the Vietnamese people like capitalism, so she made a video on this. I haven't seen the video. I want to see the video. I want to know what like what she invokes to like argue this away, you know? Let me see if I can, hold on. I'll find the Pew Research study first so we can see how like monumental the hill she has to climb is. In a 2014 Pew Research Center survey, about 3/4 of Vietnamese expressed a favorable opinion of the US. Do you have any idea how wild it is? The idea of 3/4 of the Vietnamese people liking the United States after what we did to Vietnam. Like, that wasn't 200 years ago or whatever. There are people alive in Vietnam today who remember that. and still, in spite of that, yeah, here we go. There's the Vox article on it. Support for a free market system. And the yellow is disagree, and the green is agree. And they did this poll in a bunch of countries. And Vietnam has this ridiculous, completely disproportionate, insane level of support for a free market system compared to every other country in the world. Vietnam, #1, the most goddamn free market. Millet should have ran here. Jesus. You know, like, pretty remarkable. So I want to see what argument she invokes to sort of combat this incredibly disparate result here. Argentina the lowest? Yeah, and look what they ended up doing. Wacky how that works out, huh? Yeah, what we need to do, okay, we need to send Millet to Vietnam. We need to send Ho Chi Minh to Argentina. We need to switch places and make people happy.
Hi everybody.
Hi.
I'm Luna. Welcome back to Luna Ơi.
Hello.
You see this graphic? I hate this graphic. I've had this graphic messaged to me, emailed to me, and tagged to me on social media over and over again, at least once or twice per week since I started my channel. It shows the result from a survey conducted by Pew Research, which is supposedly proves that Vietnamese people love capitalism.
True. Oh, to be clear, by the way, Luna Oi isn't a socialist. I am. So as a socialist, there are lots of things you could say that are insightful with regards to this Pew Research, you know? Like, there's no denying the fact that free market reforms have massively uplifted the poor in places like Vietnam or China, you know? Like, the shift towards that system has been to the benefit of those people, in large part because the previous systems were really, really bad. They weren't socialist. This isn't moving from socialism to capitalism. This is moving from whatever bizarre hodgepodge of like state-controlled private, you know, state capitalism, whatever, to a more effective private market system. Now, that doesn't mean private, ownership is the most effective way to run an economy. It just means it's a good step up from what they were doing before.
I debunked it on Twitter a while ago, but since Twitter is circling the drain and I still get the graphic sent to me pretty often, here I am, making a video debunking this bullshit chart from a neoliberal propaganda outlet. So,
wait, Pew Research is a neoliberal propaganda outlet? I mean, all pollsters have their biases, but that seems like a pretty reductive that seems like a fairly reductive way of framing what they do, but okay. You know, they're not like World in Data or whatever. You know, they're a little more impartial than that.
Let's jump right in and start tearing this lousy pixelated JPEG into shreds. The first thing you should always ask yourself...
Is it too quiet? I can turn it up a little bit. Hold on. I'm going to do the boost volume thing.
When you see an infographic like this is, where did it come from? Who made it? What is their agenda? Who's their audience? And who is funding it? This is just basic media literacy. And unfortunately, it seems to be in short supply in the West, which is why I have to make this video. Okay, calm down, Luna.
Yeah.
Pew Research Center was founded in 2004.
Okay. Wait, I really hope this video contains more than like, did you know that the Pew Research Center is a Western institution? Checkmate.
And it is funded by Pew Charitable Trust.
Does anyone know how the USA's relationship with Vietnam is? Yeah, we are incredibly close allies with them. Didn't we recently upgrade our relationship with them to like one of the closest kinds of strategic ally? Yeah, there was like a recent Biden recently like elevated. Is this it? Oh yeah, this was released this year, September 11th. Joint Leaders Statement elevating U.S.-Vietnam relationships to a comprehensive strategic partnership. On September 10th, 2023, the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam Central Committee, Nguyen, that's how you pronounce that, right? Phu Trong, and President of the U.S., Joseph R. Biden, Robinette Biden Jr., the leaders, met and held talks in Hanoi, Vietnam, hailed a historic new phase of bilateral cooperation and friendship, da-da-da-da. So, you know, Vietnam is a capitalist country. Nguyen, right. Vietnam is a capitalist country. It's not... There's just no getting around that.
Pew Charitable Trust is an NGO which was founded in 1948 by the Pew family, who owned Sun Oil Company or Sunoco. So it's private oil money that founded this research center. And Pew family members, along with current board members and CEOs of Sunoco, have always been a majority of trustees of the Pew Charitable Trust, all the way up to this day. Now let's take a look at the Pew family. The Pews got their...
Okay, so it is good to look at the backing and the founding of like institutions that come out with data that you want to look at. Doing this with the Pew Research Center seems pretty dumb because at this point it's like, did you know all institutions in the history of the United States have at some point been tied to money and moneyed interests? This is the case for literally everything. If it is a privately run group, that means that at some point it was tied to private investing, and if it's publicly managed, that means it's like a State Department asset. This doesn't really have anything to do with like, there are times when this is valid and okay, so a good example of when it's valid to engage in this kind of critical analysis, when it's actually like meaningful and useful, is when you hear about like, hey, this is like a new action group that did polling, and the action group is called like Moms for Healthy Families, and the polling they did showed that 99% of Americans think trans people are icky. And then you can like go, okay, so looking into it, Moms for Healthy American Families was founded 2 years ago, and all the people who run it are like conservative demagogues and pundits and politicians, and all the money it's gotten is from like dark money billionaire PACs, you know? It's like, I wonder if this group was created with the sole intention of disseminating counterpropaganda, you know? The Pew Research Center, unfortunately, is not subject to these claims or criticisms because they do so much polling for so many reasons that you kind of have to look at like the specific methodology of any given poll they do. I guess the implication here is that the Pew Research Center has for this entire time just been waiting to convince the American people that the Vietnamese public really likes free market economics. Like for some reason they skewed the data really specifically against Vietnam in that one result. Like, yeah, the long con, you know? I want to see if she actually tackles like the data itself.
Private.
In the 90s, Pew Charitable Trust followed the major trend in capitalism by becoming more neoliberal.
Guys, did you know that institutions in America that are private institutions?
And shows a survey labeled.
Okay.
Okay, so now we know who Pew Research is.
We do, yes, we know now.
Let's
okay.
take a look at this goddamn graphic. As you can see, this graphic shows a survey labeled Support for Free Market System. It claims to have asked people in various nations to state whether they agree or disagree with the statement. Most people are better off in a free market economy, even though some people are rich and some are poor. This was part of the Spring 2014 questionnaire, which covered a variety of topics on economics, cultural attitudes, and so on.
Okay.
I should point out that even just the phrasing of that statement is propagandistic, since it claims that some are rich and some are poor.
Okay. I don't think this statement is like perfectly neutral, but I don't think this is a very biased way of phrasing the question. Because, yeah, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Most people are better off in a free market economy, even though some people are rich and some are poor. That seems pretty, if anything, it's biased against free markets. Yeah, you could make the argument that it is biased against free markets because maybe like some people would argue that potentially everyone could be rich under a free market, some bullshit like that. It doesn't come across as too propagandistic to me.
When in reality, a tiny number of people are rich and the vast majority are poor.
That's not. It says some are rich, some are poor. The point is to ask whether or not people agree with it, not to like load the question by going, do you agree with free market economics in spite of, and then you cite all of Karl Marx's Capital? Like, do you agree or disagree with this statement? And then you just like type out the entirety of the Communist Manifesto saying, I wonder.
But as we will soon find out, the survey question is even more dishonest than that.
Okay.
But before I explain why, let's look at the reported statistics on the chart.
Doesn't the Vietnamese government endorse capitalist aspects that it itself reformed to? Yes. Luna Oi denies that they were capitalist reforms. As my understanding is that, like, everyone in Vietnam, including the government, is like, yes, we moved towards private ownership and it's improved our economy and people are wealthier now. And Luna Oi is like the one person pretending that that didn't happen. I don't know.
In the advanced countries section, 78% of South Koreans, 73% of Germans, and 70% of the US agree that the free market system is good, while only 47% of Japanese and 45% of Spanish agreed. Okay, so opinions from rich countries vary a lot from 45 to 78%.
Okay.
This makes me wonder, why would so many people in the richest capitalist nations be so skeptical of capitalism?
What does this have to do with the perceived bias of the study? The truth of the matter is that people in Western... So it's, okay, this is like very basic Marxist analysis, right? Where the conditions that undermine capitalism are sown through the development of capitalism, right? So like capitalist industrialization enriches a country, but the inequalities produced by it give people the thought that maybe having the bourgeoisie control everything isn't actually the best way to make use of the resources and efficiency that industrial capitalism has brought about, right? Like this is like very basic Marx, So in countries like Japan and America, we've already experienced the big boom in living standards that have taken place as a consequence of industrialization. Now, as things sort of fester in this in this late stage capitalist system that we live in, it's more, I guess, it's a lot easier to wake up and think, what is it all for? Whereas in a country like Vietnam or in China, the benefits they experience from free market economics happened relatively recently in the 90s. Dengism, the reforms that Vietnam did, they have in a recent lifetime seen their standard of living massively improve as a consequence of free market reform. So they're still in a state where they're optimistic about the future development of free market economics. Now, obviously, this is going to vary massively country to country. Different countries will have different attitudes. For example, I would argue that late-stage capitalism is way more developed in South Korea and Japan than it is in America. Like, in terms of worker conditions, things are way more over there than they are over here in the United States. And they also haven't experienced like recently uplifting benefits of privatization, like not in the same way that like, I don't know, Vietnam has, right? But the problem over there, I think, is that they have a much more stringent worker culture that maybe makes people more individualistic when it comes to their ideas of like what they ought to be doing in the economy, Like maybe they don't want to concede their perceived ability to succeed in the private economy by suggesting that capitalism isn't working. It's like the temporarily embarrassed millionaire thing. That's one potential explanation,
Hold that thought. Let's move on. In the emerging countries...
Oh, yeah. Also, South Korea killed all of its socialists. Yeah, don't forget. Yeah, there's also that.
Section. Vietnam comes in at number 1. According to this graphic, 95% of Vietnamese people agree that the free market system is awesome. This is a massive percentage, higher than any other nation, even higher...
Well, they didn't say awesome, to be clear. They just said they thought it was good in spite of those issues. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Blablato. They have an entire methodology page for this poll that they did back in 2014. It's just available. That's really nice. I love that transparency. It's one of the reasons I like Pew Research. They're a lot more It's a lot more straightforward engaging with them. What was the sample size in Vietnam? Let me see. Yeah, 1,000 people, same as everywhere else. Face-to-face adults, 18 plus. Interviewed from April 16th to May 8th. Margin of error, plus or minus 4.5 percentage points. Yeah, it's acceptable, given the, extreme disparity in the data here.
Than the richest capitalist nations. Holy smokes. Does this mean that Vietnam is super extremely capitalist now? Even more capitalist than the USA, the birthplace of capitalism?
The United States isn't the birthplace of capitalism. The United States is just one of a number of industrialized countries. Wait. Economic liberalism is an Enlightenment philosophy. She might be joking. I can't tell with her. I've seen her videos on Ho Chi Minh thought, okay? I can't tell with her.
That's certainly what the people who made this 3D graphic want you to think. And that's why so many annoying anti-communists and ultra-leftists love sending me this chart.
Anti-communists and ultra-leftists. I guess I would fit in the ultra-leftist category here.
Because they believe that this one little JPEG undermines everything I say about Vietnam following a socialist path and Vietnamese people supporting communism.
Oh, so she's not even going to contest the chart. She's just going to be like, you really think this one piece of data undermines all of the times that I've said that it's actually like super communist?
Speaking as a formally educated Vietnamese communist, in terms of...
Okay, that was a mistranslation, or that was a annotation. It's not formally, it's formally. She brags about being formally educated in Vietnam's education system in Marxist-Leninist Ho Chi Minh with Vietnamese characteristic thought. It's the most like direct, straightforward indoctrination bragging I've ever seen in my life. I love to get my education on revolutionary anti-establishment sentiment from the institution that I would be seeking to overthrow, You can see her other videos, man. She's crazy.
Of universal Marxist-Leninist philosophical methodology of dialectical materialism. That's some bullshit right there.
You might have also seen a screenshot from one of her videos circulate Twitter now and again, where she says that, like, didn't she say that the dialectical materialism is when a Marxist makes analysis based off of facts? Wasn't that what she said? She was like, and the thing that made Marx different, and the thing that dialectical materialism is when you make decisions based off facts, or something like that. Yeah. I think that's what she said. Incredible stuff.
Seriously, I hate it when people pretend they can understand anything about a nation as complex as Vietnam just because they saw one out of context JPEG on Twitter.
That's not out of context. It's just a screenshot of a Pew Research. Man, she's not going to address this at all. I could do a better job than this. You could talk about how the like underlying social threat in Vietnam is towards like communist ethics and communist governance and communist redistribution, and then it's just like a temporary bump in support for free market economics following government reform that moved you out of an inefficient previous system but doesn't change the overall trajectory of your state towards an eventual socialist paradigm. Like, dude, I could do better than this. Come on. Her definition of dialectical materialism. Is it time-stamped?
For now, just remember, dialectical materialism is all about understanding the world by forming arguments which are based on evidence which we get from the real world.
Everyone write that down. Everyone write that down, okay? You're not going to get another opportunity like this to learn from an authentic, state-trained, academic in Ho Chi Minh thought. Yeah, this is also technically Peronism, by the way, in case you were wondering.
It demonstrates a complete lack of historical and comprehensive investigation, and it's a kind of mindset I see far too often in the capitalist West. But even I have to admit, when I first saw the graphic, it is weird.
Okay, address it. Yes, please. What is dialectical materialism? Like, what's the process? Okay. So Marx was a student, kind of. It was a fan of some of Hegel's writings. Hegel talked about the dialectic in an ideological sense. A dialectic is when you have two contradictory ideas and you attempt to achieve synthesis between them by observing the resolution of their mutual contradictions. So you have like one idea, for example, which is universal suffrage, a liberal value, and another idea, which is white supremacy and slavery. How can these two ideas coexist? Well, they did. for centuries and still do to a large extent. So the dialectic is you have these contradictory ideals and they engage with each other and they compete and they sort of refine until eventually you reach a synthesis, which God willing one day will arrive at a synthesis between universal suffrage and white supremacy. You know, I'll tell you when we get there. And Marx was like, yo, Hegel, you're dumb and gay. In reality, the real dialectic that you should be focusing on right now, okay, the real dialectic is the material dialectic. Forget dialectics between ideas. Ideas are not constructed in a vacuum. Ideas are assembled as mechanisms to legitimize a person's position in a class hierarchy. That is to say, people will develop ideas in ways that align with the material interests of their class, or at the very least, what they're told are the material interests of their class. So forget about this ideology shit. You know, what you need to be concerned with is the actual material dialectic, the resolution of these disparate physical forces. And the dialectic, of course, the most Marxists are concerned with in this case is the material positioning between the bourgeois and the proletariat, where you have the conflict and the antagonism is present in their fight for dominance. So that's what dialectical materialism is. It's viewing the world through the lens of analyzing conflicts in material class and station and the way in which those conflicts resolve or at least shift over time based on the mutual antagonistic forces being sheared off or adjusted or changed or resolved or shifted altogether. Her definition is the definition of empiricism, which is a different thing. Okay.
And the Vietnamese strongly agree that capitalism is cool and good. That certainly does not line up with my own experiences living in Vietnam my entire life.
Lived experience, gotcha.
How could that possibly be? Who are these Vietnamese capitalism lovers, and why haven't I been running across them in my entire life? Desperate for answers, I emailed Pew Research Center and asked for the original questionnaire in Vietnamese. It took them months, but finally I got my reply from the Pew Research team.
Okay, hold on. Wait, this is actually like an interesting... Okay.
They attached the original questionnaire in Vietnamese. So here we go. Let's find out what the hell is going on. The graphic attributes the chart to question number 13 of the survey. So let's look at question number 13 and find out what it actually asks in Vietnamese. I will now translate the question twice. First, word by word. Then I will give you my translation of how the question would read in English. If you are skeptical of me or my translation, you can just ask your friends that can speak Vietnamese to confirm.
Okay, chat. Anyone in chat speak Vietnamese?
Tips. Speaking as a professional translator, don't just Google Translate or ChatGPT when it comes to translating Vietnamese because they suck a lot. Okay, so here is question number 13, translated word for word. Please let know Mr. Mrs. Complete agree, quite disagree, or complete disagree with sentences after. Condition economy of people got better in economy market free, even though they're not really rich.
I'm always saying this.
And here is my translation into a proper English sentence. Please let us know if you completely agree, strongly disagree, or completely disagree with the following sentence. The people's economic conditions have gotten better in the free market, even though they have not gotten rich yet.
Do I trust her translation here? The people's economic conditions have gotten better in the free market, even though they haven't gotten rich yet? I'm almost certain that she's lying here. It seems very unlikely to me that the way the question is phrased would, like, even though they haven't gotten rich yet, why would they ask that? That's very strange to me. Can we try Google Translate? I agree with Luna Oi that you can't really trust Google Translate. Also, I couldn't copy paste this into it. I couldn't do all the accents and stuff. I wouldn't be able to like actually get the Vietnamese into the Google Translate. Google Translate of your question. How do you do that so quickly? People's economic conditions have become better in the free market economy, even though they may not strongly really rich. Okay. So Google Lens. Okay, gotcha. Even though they may not strongly really rich. Well, obviously that's not semantically correct. Of course, perfect translations aren't really possible. I just take issue with the idea that a Pew Research question would have had it would have been like, yeah, agree or disagree. Things have gotten better, even though, like, outcome, right? Because why would you ask that question while presupposing an outcome? What if a person responding didn't think that people hadn't really gotten rich yet? you know? I mean, compared to the economic state Vietnam was in back in the 70s and 80s, like this would just be a bad question in terms of like clarity. And if Pew Research wanted to tip the scales in favor of people seeming more pro-capitalist than they actually were, they could have done it better than this. That being said, I'll continue with this video because apparently our Vietnamese mod is not present and I can't speak Vietnamese. But I do question this translation. Is that true, Posadas? Okay, I'll take a look at this when I get the chance to.
And here are the only options available. Completely agree, quite disagree, completely disagree, do not know, or refuse to answer. Let me tell you, I was shocked when I saw how this question is phrased in Vietnamese for two reasons. The question in Vietnamese is completely different from the question on the graphic in English. And the question poses a sneaky assumption which survey respondents could not push back against in any way.
Wait, but the sneaky assumption is in your favor. The sneaky assumption, the thing the question is presuming in your translation is that the people haven't gotten rich yet. That's a presumption that favors your side. So if that's the case, like that should be an argument in my favor. Maybe the people of Vietnam are even more pro-capitalist, you know, than we think.
Remember, in English, the statement that you are asked to agree or disagree with was, most people are better off in a free market economy, even though some people are rich and some are poor. Compare this side by side with the statement in Vietnamese. The people's economic conditions have gotten better in the free market, even though they have not gotten rich yet. The fundamental meaning.
Most people are better off in a free market economy versus the people's economic conditions have gotten better in the free market economy. Those are slightly different, but there's no such thing as a perfect translation, so I'm willing to bet that a little bit of weirdness there might be up to the fact that you are translating between different languages. Not just different languages, but different languages that have different, like, totally different, like, etymological histories, right? So there's always gonna be a bit of, like, translation weirdness there. I get that. The sentiment is comparable. It's this bit at the end there that's weird to me, but it's not weird in a way that really compromises my argument, you know? It's weird in the opposite direction.
Have gotten better in the free market, even though they have not gotten rich yet. The fundamental meaning of these two statements is entirely different. The first question is asking if people are better off in a free market economy, which is a question of reference. In Vietnamese, the question asks if people's economic conditions have improved in the free market, which is a question of perception about change over time.
That is true, but I wonder how much of this is just a natural consequence of translation weirdness, because the sentiment of the question is very, very similar, right? I guess the question is, what person would say yes to one of these but no to the other? Like, who would say, yes, people are better off in a free market economy, but also, no, people's economic conditions have not gotten better? That doesn't, I don't know who would do that. And likewise, the other way around, who would say, yes, the people's economic conditions have gotten better in a free market economy, but no, people are not better off in a free market economy? That's one way to determine whether or not the translation is meaningful. In this case, can you imagine situations in which a person would give different answers to the different questions, depending on their translation? And in this case, it seems like they'd be pretty well aligned. I mean, it's not perfect, but yeah. It's still a valid point to bring up. I don't think this was wrong of Luna Oi to bring up, but I mean, Luna Oi is such an ideologue that she denies that Vietnam is a capitalist government. Like, with the way Luna Oi talks about Vietnam, everyone there is a communist, the government is communist, Vietnam hates America, every person there is like a highly disciplined scholar of Ho Chi Minh thought, and pro-queer movements are actually Western color revolutions, you know?
Market, which is a question of perception about change over time. In Vietnamese, the survey did not ask if most people are better off in a free market. It just asked if people's life got better.
Again, while I acknowledge that there is a difference, I don't think that difference is enough to argue the question is biased, except for that last bit where I do wonder about her translation.
And this is a significant difference between what was actually asked and what was reported. Pretty much the only way to answer this question is to think back on the past several years and decide whether or not life is getting better. And yes, the lives of Vietnamese people is getting better. And also notice that there is...
Because of free market reforms. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but Doi Moi is, I guess, how I would take a shot at it. Part of a series on Ho Chi Minh thought A socialist-oriented market economy. Greater role for market forces in the coordination of economic activity between enterprises and government agencies, and allowed for private ownership of small enterprises and the creation of a stock exchange for both state and non-state enterprises. So let me just hold on. Vietnam GDP graph. Not annual change, you. This data doesn't go back very far. Why do all these stop back at 2010? Who gives a about a GDP graph that stops in 2010? This one stops in 2021. Oh my God. So these reforms began in 1986. And over here, see, it doesn't even show before 1986. Man, Vietnam was doing pretty badly for a long time. They've only really started picking up recently. People in 2010 would have cared. Yeah. Is that data neoliberal? I mean, I guess so, yeah. My brain is still swollen from absorbing every scrap of information about Peronism. True! Very true. As a result of vast privatization and economic reforms, Vietnam underwent a miraculous economic transformation in the 1990s. The period of reform saw an average GDP growth of 4.4% per year, with the average GDP growth accelerating to around 6.5% per year from 1990 till the Asian financial crisis of 1997. Vietnam's GDP grew almost 5 times, from 6.4 billion to 31.1 billion in 2000. GDP per capita grew from $95 to $390. Nice. Unlike many other fast-growing economies, the Vietnamese government diverted tax revenue collected from the expansion of economic activities to ensure that underdeveloped areas received adequate investment in infrastructure and welfare. As a result, poverty rates declined significantly in most provinces, while income also recorded significant growth in metropolitan areas. See, guys, this is really good. Vietnam had a big economic boost following privatization, but rather than just like become neoliberal, Vietnam redirected a lot of that tax revenue back towards the poorest people in their country. It wasn't perfect, and I think the Vietnamese government does a lot of fucked up stuff, but in terms of like how to handle stuff like this, they had a much more like social democratic bent towards their growth than a lot of other countries in the region that experience comparable growth, you know? That's really good. But why not defend this honestly, you know? This is free market economic development, right? Like, don't look at that and go, you know, oh no, actually it's communism or whatever. You know, be straightforward with it. I think that's fine. There's lots of stuff you could learn from the growth of Vietnam if you're honest about it and not like weirdly ideological.
There's no way to push back against the idea that Vietnam is a free market economy. This question sneaks in the assumption that the surveyed people already live in a free market economy.
Luna Oi, I have terrible news for you. I have very bad news for you.
Economy, and they can only answer if their life is getting better or not. And also, significantly, there was no option to disagree with the presumption that Vietnam is a free market. It's like the old trick question. Did you stop beating your wife? Your option is only yes or no, and you cannot deny the assumption that is embedded in the question.
So Luna Oi's contention with the question is that she doesn't like the idea, the presumption that Vietnam is a free market economy. Okay. I mean, no, they're not a free market economy in the same way that like Norway or Sweden isn't. They certainly had like reforms.
A few people have tried to defend Pew Research by saying it was just a bad translation or an honest mistake. I find that extremely hard to believe, given the nature and funding of Pew Research and its strong ties to far-right capitalism.
Anyway, you know, in a lot of ways, I think that Luna Oi's biggest crime here, apart from being a fascist, is she actually undersells Vietnam quite a bit. You could learn a lot from Vietnam in terms of like what lessons you could apply to other growing economies and how to responsibly manage the boost in investment in a way that doesn't make you like a complete simp to Western business investment. You could do that, but in order to do that, you would have to critically engage with the nature of the reforms that took place. This is like Dengism. Undeniably free market reforms. There's no getting around that, you know? But once you accept that, you can move forward.
With a list. And I find it very implausible that they would just accidentally make a mistake like this. And if it was a mistake, then why haven't they corrected it? The study goes all the way back to 2014, almost 10 years ago, and nobody has caught the mistake until now. I just find that very hard to believe, considering the millions of dollars in...
I would actually consider Vietnam to be a significant success story. Oh, no, I agree. Yeah, 100%, fully. Yeah, I think that the Vietnamese economic development in a lot of ways was actually more impressive and more responsibly handled than China's. China has massively grown its middle class, but in a lot of ways, I think it showed a lot less foresight and a lot less care for its people.
Pew Research receives and how these surveys get spread all over the world, but I will give Pew Research a chance. If you officially correct the record on this survey and announce publicly that this is a terrible and misleading translation, I will happily delete this video and my Twitter thread and replace it with coverage of...
I'm sure Pew Research is going to get right on publishing an unneeded retraction for a decade-old international study at the behest of one video. Okay.
Your honest retraction. But I'm not going to be holding my breath.
Okay.
Anyway, I hope you can see how this is just one very small example of how Western media outlets and neoliberal organizations...
See, this is what I mean by like the ideological thing. She delegitimizes the value of the country she claims to care about because everything has to be this like communist Vietnam fighting off the lies of the Western neoliberal. Like it doesn't matter what it is. That's the narrative she applies to literally everything. You know, which it just doesn't suit. I wonder how she like, hold on. Actually, I'm very curious. Hold on. Luna, Oi, U.S. Vietnam relations. I don't even know how I'd like look up this subject. I like, is there like, would she, how does she feel about the fact that the Vietnamese government is allied with the United States?
Hi, everybody.
Oh, that Vietnam ally with the USA against China. Oh shit, she has done a video on it, kind of. Yep, she did a video on it. It's so fascinating to see dialectical materialism, remember that's when you use facts, being applied to government policy. Vietnam doesn't have to choose between China and the US because it has the self-determination to have mutual relations with both while having stronger relation with Cuba and Laos, which Vietnam views as comrades. What does that even mean? Nothing.
I'm Luna. Welcome back to Luna ơi. Number 2, comprehensive strategic partnership. This is the middle level of relationship Vietnam can have with other countries and the kind of relationship the USA was just upgraded to. Currently, 5 countries have a comprehensive strategic partnership with Vietnam, including China, Russia, India, South Korea, and now the USA. Vietnam is also working with Indonesia on upgrading to a comprehensive strategic partnership, which would make the total number 6. But notice, this is just number 2nd on the list of relationship levels, meaning they are one higher level of relationship Vietnam can have.
Oh no.
So no, BBC and Reuters, the US doesn't have the highest level of relationship that is possible to have with Vietnam. There is one higher level, the great friendship and special unity level.
This is a communist country term if ever I've seen one. Or upgrading you to our great friendship and special unity tier.
Level of relationship. Only Laos has a great friendship relationship with Vietnam, and only Cuba has a relationship of special unity.
Wait, but that says special friendship, not special unity.
This level of relationship is much deeper than the comprehensive strategic partnership level of relationship and indicates the shared history of socialist struggle and mutual support and a degree of total trust which has been tested through time and hardship. The great friendship and special unity levels of relationship are much stronger ties than the comprehensive strategic partnership.
Is that what she has to say on the subject? Like, it's okay, don't worry, comrades. The U.S. and Vietnam aren't friends, and you can tell because the United States hasn't bought a Tier 3 sub to Vietnam or whatever.
3. Vietnam does not allow any countries to put military bases in our territory. This one is pretty simple. Vietnam does not accept foreign military bases on our territory, and we don't allow any country to use part of our territory to wage war against other countries. Modern history clearly shows us that if there are foreign military bases on our territory, it is easy to turn our country into the target of hostile forces, or will at least make it difficult for our country to avoid being drawn into conflict and wars between countries. Not only that, but military
tự Việt Nam đạt được trong gần 40 năm đổi mới toàn diện nhằm các mục tiêu dân giàu, nước mạnh, dân chủ, công bằng, văn minh, phát huy xây dựng nhà nước pháp quyền xã hội chủ nghĩa và chủ động tích cực hội nhập quốc tế. Tổng Bí thư Nguyễn Phú Trọng nêu rõ đường lối đối ngoại nhất quán của Việt Nam là độc lập tự chủ, hòa bình, hữu nghị, hợp tác.
U.S. base in Vietnam. I'm very sorry to tell you, as much of an epic own as this would be, This was a U.S. airbase during a different era of our relationship with Vietnam. When we built this airbase in Vietnam, we were actually not on good terms with Vietnam.
Manipulate the truth and spread the false reactionary narratives all over the world through their charitable funds and think tanks. But sadly, millions of people from all over the world, especially the West, will just keep falling for their lies. If there are two lessons you learn from this video, they are: you simply cannot trust neoliberal think tanks organizations. They all have an agenda, and that agenda has everything to do with where they get the money. And you need to do comprehensive and historical
Dialectical
research on any
so it's
important
factual.
topic before forming your opinion and running your mouth. I don't mean to be harsh, but the number of people who have shared this bogus graphic with me, thinking they were delivering some kind of huge gotcha, is running well into the hundreds, and it's symptomatic of the lack of respect people have for Vietnam in the West.
I wonder if is Vietnam socialist? I wonder if there's another poll that like replicates the outcome. Polling Vietnam economy. We know a lot of them like America. We need to do more polling in Vietnam, specifically so that there's more discourse in weird tanky circles. Look, Vietnam is still seeing a lot of growth. Even during the COVID pandemic, Vietnam, Taiwan, and China here are the only countries experiencing growth, whereas every other country in the region had a massive shrink in their economy. Like, Vietnam's doing a lot correctly economically. It's just you have to advocate for it correctly, you know? Vietnam did really well in COVID, if I recall correctly. Yeah. I feel like Luna Oi is like the Vietnamese equivalent of I'm trying to think. I don't know. What would be the equivalent of somebody who's like a fierce nationalist for a country, but in a way that the leadership of the country wouldn't actually want? Like they're like a traditionalist nationalist, where the nationalism they're advocating for is from like a prior era. I don't know. It'd be like being a Stalinist in Russia or something, where like most of the time the stuff you say is like kind of pro-Russian, but every once in a while the narrative kind of shifts and it's different. You know, it's very weird. It's very weird. You know, Lindbergh. Yeah, this is what that is. Yeah. You're describing fascism? I mean, she does and says fascist stuff pretty often, but she'll switch to like anti-fascist rhetoric pretty quickly. She's just a nationalist, you know? It's her whole goddamn thing.